Hi and welcome to J&B Talk F1 this week on Wednesday the 23rd of September 2015. A lot to get through today, big edition we've got for you, and I'm Jawad as always, joined by Baden Westerweller. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Great to be here again.
Yeah, and we've got a lot to cover this week. None to start off with the Singapore Grand Prix from the weekend, and then of course we've got a double-headed, the Japanese Grand Prix in a few days' time, and we'll be previewing that for you as well as some news regarding possible retirement announcement from Jenson Button. At his second home race being Japan. We'll take a look at engine manufacturers and who's going to be pairing up with who, Red Bull and Mana Marussia, and also what's going on with Romain Grosjean too. A lot to digest following the Singapore weekend, and we'll get started with the Singapore Grand Prix, and it was Sebastian Vettel who converted his pole position into a race victory, supreme in form, and goes back to say it was like when he was at Red Bull, wasn't it?
Oh, it's fascinating, really. We just hark back a couple of years there, two or three, back to the golden days, that Halcyon era for Red Bull, when every other race was dominated by Sebastian and that dastardly finger of his. But in many ways, it was quite refreshing to see him just streets ahead out the front. And of course, he did on the way to that victory. He broke Senna's record, and really can't begrudge him. And for Ferrari, it's always a good sight. And for Mercedes, yeah, we all thought they were going to turn it on come race day, and it just never transpired.
Not at all, and you mentioned there before that Vettel broke Senna's record as well, and Sebastian Vettel now is third on the all-time winners list in Formula One. Michael Schumacher being the first, and Alain Prost number two. So Sebastian Vettel now number three, and Lewis Hamilton still stuck on that number 40 behind Senna's record of 41. Anyway, Daniel Ricciardo finished second, and he was able to keep Sebastian Vettel honest through the race. Vettel, when he made that brilliant start, was able to chewed up a lot of his tyre life, which allowed Red Bull and Ricciardo to sort of hone in at the end of each stint. And what happened to him was that the safety car interferences pretty much spoiled any chance that Red Bull had of perhaps getting the undercut on Vettel to get into the lead.
Well, it's interesting as well. Earlier on, it looked like they had really made a bit of a blunder initially, but the second intruder, the intruder that did transpire, triggering that later safety car. In fact, prior to that, it seemed as though the race was going into the hands of Daniel Ricciardo there. So it was hyped as one of their opportunities to pinch a victory. They'll be a bit dirty with that, I think, after Hungary as well, when they just missed out. You can see that clearly they've got the form in the past, and it was a freak occurrence, we must say, that invader just wandering aimlessly down that the back straight. But whether it cruelled the chances or not, Ferrari ultimately they had the pace outright, and they were deserving victors.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, so Red Bull did feel that the intruder that triggered the second safety car ruined the chance of an undercut over Vettel, but nevertheless, both drivers had the pace to go up against each other. We've got Kimi Raikkonen finishing third for Ferrari, and Kimi a bit unhappy actually with third. Always seems to want more than he gets, but still another podium for the Iceman, his second of the season. Did we lose you there? Sorry.
We're all here. Yeah. I had maybe a little bit of a moment there, but I'm still with you, and you're with me. We're all good.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was just saying that Kimi with a third was a bit unsatisfied, but second podium of the season regardless for the Iceman. Any words on
Oh, it's just good to see Kimi up there. Of course, he always wants that victory. He's not satisfied with anything less, and we know he wants something a bit stronger than what he would be having to hydrate during races such as Singapore. And he obviously got right into the champagne post-race. He's very fond of any form of alcoholic beverage, but you can see he wants that victory, and his fans do as well. And whether it's going to come this season or not, but at least we know now he's got another campaign ahead of him to make that breakthrough.
Indeed, and after that, well, the Mercedes as well still mystified over their lack of pace that they had over the weekend. As you were saying before, Baden, we sort of expected, and they expected perhaps to bounce back in the race, but that didn't at all happen. In the end, we had Lewis Hamilton lose power and ultimately retire from the race, meaning he scored 0 points. But it was a bit of a smart ploy from the team going into the first round of pit stops, whilst the top three in Vettel, Ricciardo and Raikkonen chose to put on the super soft tyres again. Both Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg took the soft tyres and thought perhaps they could challenge those leaders at the end for a race win, but ultimately for Hamilton it ended up going belly up and he retired from the race. Nico Rosberg in the end finished fourth it was and was able to get some points on his teammate in the championship.
Well, you've also got to look at the start. Rosberg suffered issues not dissimilar to 12 months earlier, which really was the ultimate catalyst in him conceding that points lead he'd enjoyed up until that stage. And from that point, both cars are essentially on the back foot. We saw with Hamilton retiring mid-race, and then Rosberg was pretty helpless from that midpoint onwards. He just didn't seem to have any not incentive, but just the car just didn't seem to have anything in it to challenge the Red Bulls and the Ferraris.
So he was pretty much running his own race down in that position, and he ended up. He was threatened a little bit by the Williams at the start, but in the end he finished comfortably by 10 seconds ahead of Valtteri Bottas, who brought the car home for fifth. Good result for Williams, considering this sort of circuit they struggle a lot on. They struggled in Monaco and also Hungary, but fifth place for Bottas was very strong. And indeed, Danny Kvyat as well, who dropped from fourth, but still finished in the points for sixth. For Sergio Perez, seventh place was the best he could do, although he was put under intense pressure at the end. It has to be said by the two Toro Rossos. This was a funny situation, wasn't it, Baden, where the team asked Max Verstappen to get ahead of Carlos Sainz in order to have a go at the Force India, but in the end, when the move wasn't done, Max didn't concede the place back to his teammate.
Yeah, well, Max was quite firm in standing his ground, and rightly so, as it transpired in the past day or so. It seemed as though Max clearly had that raw pace, and you wouldn't blame him, considering what we've heard about his father, what he would have done to young Max had he not ended up keeping his ground. And it's good to see anyway at this point that he's not going to be some kind of subordinate, and he's bound for great things if it wasn't already apparent.
Indeed, and this sort of what the feedback we've seen so far from fans and other riders as well, that could be a bit of divide. Could be a bit of a divide actually. People say Carlos now needs to step things up a little and not to be that sort of team player or whatever and try and get his elbows out, but we'll see more of that in the next race. But nevertheless, it was a pretty good race from Verstappen, it has to be said. He had that stall at the start and he ended up rejoining the race a lap down and then clawed his way back up to 8th, so probably drive of the day for Verstappen, it has to be said.
Oh, absolutely. It goes without saying that Vettel was peerless out the front, but for Max, it really looked like he was getting wheeled into his garage at that the getaway, and to see him, let alone just on the lead lap and then in the points, he's clearly able to make the right moves. Other drivers just would have been plodding around for testing miles, and that car, it must be said though, the Toro Rosso, it's more than handy, so coming into its own alongside their bigger sisters, their bigger brother and Red Bull.
He and Verstappen too is sort of already putting his hands firmly around the trophy for Rookie of the Year, it has to be said. With all this, his results may not show it on all occasions, but he has done some spectacular moves on track, hasn't he, this season?
Oh yeah, and you have to look back to Belgium and then Hungary, of course, P4, and his ill-fated attempt on Grosjean didn't quite come off to plan at Monaco, but not for a lack of trying, and with a few more years of maturity, those kind of moves will be executed to precision.
Very much so, and we heard that Verstappen credits his, or this was in Belgium, he credited his, where he learned his overtaking move from was a video game. So there you go, you can learn stuff from racing video games, but moving it on anyway. The other Force India and Nico Hulkenberg, he was unfortunate to crash out of the race, which triggered the first safety car. The incident was that Felipe Massa was, he had a slow pit stop anyway, but he was exiting the pits, and both drivers didn't appear to see each other, it seemed, and they came together at turn 2. Hulkenberg was out, but Massa was able to continue on, but not for much longer before a gearbox issue took him out of the race. But what do you make of the penalty that was handed down on Hulkenberg for Japan? 3-place grid drop.
It was quite polarising to the naked eye when we first saw it. You couldn't really blame Hulkenberg as it was. He just couldn't see anything at all from his point of view, and the camera shots agreed, yet it is what it is. I guess they felt someone had to be blamed, and Hulkenberg, as it is, he already suffered the instant retirement, so it's a bit of just salt in the wounds to see him dock 3 places, let alone some kind of reprimand for that, considering he's got quite a clean reputation. But these are the kind of incidents, I guess, where depending on the stewards of the day, they have a different perspective, and on this time they've come down quite hard on the German.
Yeah, and Massa has always instantly put the blame on the other driver. That's something he's been akin to right throughout his career.
Canada and Germany last season.
Yeah, instantly putting the blame on the other driver. But as you said, it is what it is, and the stewards have made their call. But interestingly enough, the stewards didn't take any further action regarding a collision with Jenson Button and Pastor Maldonado, both of them coming again for the second time this season. It happened, I'm not sure which race exactly, but it was either Malaysia or China where Button went into Maldonado and he was to blame for that. But this time there was no penalty. Button ended up retiring to save the car. Diffuser damage in the end to the Lotus cost Pastor Maldonado points, and both of their teammates as well retired, making Lotus Romain Grosjean non-finisher from 2 laps from the race, 2 laps from the end of the race, sorry, and Fernando Alonso retired as well with a gearbox issue, and no points for McLaren again on a track that should have yielded them good results.
Well, an interesting postscript to both outfits' fortunes there with McLaren. Clearly they came in with higher, you wouldn't say high. They haven't really earned themselves that position at this stage of their renewed collaboration with Honda, but it all came to nothing for them, and we're expecting some big news potentially in the coming days. But on the other side, it's in front of their home crowd as well for Honda, so it's a big weekend. But on the Lotus side, in the aftermath of that race, we saw Pastor Maldonado, the news that he's been renewed, whilst a lot of hype prior to the race that Romain Grosjean could be headed elsewhere, namely at Haas next season. So clearly these are 2 teams with a lot of changes taking effect in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit about that in a second as well, but to finish off with the Singapore race, Felipe Nasr was able to snatch the final point from his teammate Marcus Ericsson. The Saubers again scoring points, and for me, sort of this for the last few races, they've been the quiet achievers, picking up the points, staying out of trouble. And what do you have to say in regards to that? Because you compared to the season they had last year where they scored no points at all, and both drivers didn't really have anything going for them, Adrian Sutil and Esteban Gutierrez. But this year, these 2 young drivers, they've really kept their head out of trouble and really tried to get the points here and there.
Well, it's the Swede who's really come to the fore in most recent events after Nasr, of course, had that imperious start to his campaign, his career at Australia, even with Ericsson there in 8th, as it was. But yeah, Ericsson's been flying the flag for Sauber since that mid-season circa time, and for Nasr as well, they've finally got an upgrade to the car. Whether that's made a huge difference or not, it's good to see them both, I guess, mixing and matching it for points and having a semi-competitive intra-team rivalry there, and who knows if they can get some sponsors on board for next season and really develop the car a bit more, have a bit of evolution, then they're capable of being semi-regular point runners and maybe challenging the upper echelons of the points rather than scrapping it out as it has been, pretty much that final point.
Yeah, bringing Sauber back into that into the regular points. And to wrap it up, then Alexander Rossi on his Grand Prix debut finished 14th and ahead of his teammate. And yeah, he kept his head out of trouble too, it must be said. But a few problems for him during the race, which was chiefly the fact that he had no radio and no communication with his team. And this was interesting during the second safety car. Everyone was waiting for Rossi to unlap himself because he was in between, I think, Ricciardo and Raikkonen, and everyone was waiting for him to unlap himself. But the point was that he had no radio to communicate with his team, so he got into a bit of trouble there, and eventually the safety car said, I give up and let's just get racing again. But still good debut for him, and as we said on the Sunday podcast, that he'll be racing in, now it'll be 4 of the remaining 6 races. Japan, he will be there, but except for Abu Dhabi and Russia, where the GP2 is.
Yeah, well, he's done all he can be really asked of, and he's been overlooked by Haas ostensibly. Whether he has got an opening at Manor pending the outcome there, a lot of hype that we'll discuss shortly. But for the American, it's a long time coming to make that debut, and yeah, he kept his nose clean really, and those kind of little skirmishes with a safety car, no radio, it's certainly putting him in the deep end. But yeah, he acquitted himself admirably.
Very much so, and we'll move it on straight away then. And one of the big talking points that may happen during this weekend at the Japanese Grand Prix is, could Jenson Button announce his retirement? And the British press have been all over this, reporting that the Briton is poised to retire from F1, and he's going to make the announcement sometime this week in Japan, as Japan is his second home, with his wife Jessica being a Japanese native, and also him having a lot of fan presence as well in Japan. And yeah, the Telegraph UK stipulates that Button, after F1, is going to combine a endurance championship drive with a media career. And we've heard the rumours saying that he might become a Top Gear host on the new program with Chris Evans, or even an F1 presenter.
Oh, well, naturally, the Formula One paddock would be poorer for his absence, but if it is that he resurfaces as a presenter, which has been really touted for a long time, going back pretty much since BBC came back into the F1 fold, when he had that the jeopardy regarding Honda and Brawn 7 years ago, and now Top Gear, this hype, it's been around now since going back to the European summer, really, back in May and June, and for all the conjecture we had last season, it came down to almost Christmas time before we learnt of Jenson's renewal. It clearly hasn't paid off this season for him. He's put in a lot of effort, but he can not really blame him at all for making the call now, rather than the prospect of suffering at the back for another 12 months. And he's seeing what Mark Webber's done. He's enjoying himself immensely in the World Endurance Championship, and combining that with a bit of media, and you have more time to focus on his triathlon pursuits as well. So it's not as though he's really going to just fade into the darkness.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you what you say there, 100%. But also now Button is starting to, and this is sort of hints to perhaps a retirement announcement. He's starting to say that after Singapore, that the form of the McLaren Honda team is starting to hurt, and he says not just only himself, but the team as a whole. The team as a whole had an ambition, and when the results are not coming in, it hurts everybody. And in terms of Button's results, he's only had the best result of 8th this season. He hasn't had a win in Formula One since the Brazilian Grand Prix 2012. 2013 was a year without podiums or even a win, and then even 2014, just the phantom podium he inherited at the Australian Grand Prix after Daniel Ricciardo's disqualification. So it has been a few seasons of pain for Button at McLaren, but the question is, if he does stay on for another year, will he be rewarded, or is it time for him to hang up the helmet?
I think for him, really, it's a long realization which has come to a head obviously more rapidly just the past few weekends when you have high expectations and they just fade away. It really accentuates those real calls. As we saw even with Hamilton, Mercedes, he was very much 50-50 going back to 2012 when he was leading that race imperiously. At Singapore, he had that engine failure, and we saw that a very poignant look back at the car. And from that moment on, he very imminently announced his move to Mercedes. So it only really takes the catalyst of one weekend of just disappointment, and it can come to you pretty quickly. Just that crystallization, it's the right call to make. I don't think you'll have any regrets at all looking back if he's not there in 6 months' time when we're on the start grid at Australia. Even if they've maybe edged up a couple of positions, he's had a good career as it is, and whatever he does next, he's going to enjoy success there as well.
Very much so, and we look forward to, if there is the announcement this weekend or during the week sometimes, we'll look forward to discussing it all over the weekend when we do our pre-race show. But anyway, moving it on now to engine manufacturers, and the big one, of course, over the Singapore Grand Prix weekend was Red Bull and Ferrari, and we did mention last week that perhaps them joining together wouldn't be such a good idea, and it seems to, it may not be, but the Renault divorce has finally been settled, and Ferrari seemed the only option for Red Bull at the moment, and perhaps what Dietrich Mateschitz said the other day contradicts what he's come out and said last night. What he said the other day was the Ferrari relationship will be an acceptable solution for the next 2 or 3 years, and that hinted towards the fact that perhaps the team are looking to get into a manufacturer works relationship with a new supplier. And according to Eddie Jordan, the seer, the prophet of the prophecy maker of F1, he said it's going to be VW Audi Group that's going to come in 2018. But the interesting thing that I found was yesterday when Red Bull released a statement or what have you. They said that we are either going to get engines that are on par with Ferrari, or we're going to quit altogether, which means Toro Rosso and Red Bull are both pulling out. Now, this is big claims.
Oh, naturally, just think of the caliber of talent that would be moribund in its absence. Ricciardo, Kvyat, Verstappen, Sainz all just cut adrift, and they'd be scrambling. They'd be lucky if one or two of them found a berth in time for next season. So this late in the piece, to leave them in the lurch, you think, especially with these the pipelines of 2 or 3 years, if they're going to have a deal, they're clearly going to stick it out. Otherwise, they'll just say right now that's the end of it. And yeah, too bad to these drivers who are clearly worthy of a seat on the grid. And if they've got to put up with a Ferrari power, which is not quite on the edge, giving them titles and victories regularly, then I guess so be it, and they'll really turn all their long-term focus to being at the forefront to come 2018 or 2019, whenever it is that they do make this eagerly anticipated hookup with the Volkswagen Group.
Well, of course, in regards to that as well, we've got this whole emissions scandal thing going on with him at the moment. But besides that, as well as the drivers as well, think about the hundreds of staff at both Milton Keynes and Faenza as well that would get laid off as a result of this. And the question that I have asked in a piece that I'm currently writing up at the moment is that, are Red Bull really in the position to hold any manufacturer ransom in this manner, say that you give us equal engines or we're going to quit altogether, considering the public humiliation they made of Renault? Would any manufacturer, do you think, will take lightly to partnering up with Red Bull if they are forcing them in this way?
Well, certainly for Mercedes, they were the first cab off the rank there, so they probably felt a bit less inclined to go down the pathway of it. Indeed, we saw they've rejected the offer to supply them with engines, and they had that worry that they could be challenging their own works team if in the hands of Adrian Newey the RB12 is more competitive than this year's car, which has certainly become more so in the past few races. We saw Hungary and beyond. They've started to edge their way forwards, and whether Renault have had any difference here or whether it's just a chassis evolution, but for Ferrari, clearly they've got nothing to lose in that respect. They think they're just going to have a good tie up there, and Ferrari power, if it's associated with winning with Red Bull, then so be it. And yeah, they'll just focus on their own developments at the front, and they're not in any position really where they're going to be on the back foot anytime soon as it is. So you think it's going to come to pass that Ferrari will supply them. It's going to take something drastic to see Red Bull bereft of power.
No, but the question is now, well, Ferrari are going to supply them, but the question is now, what kind of engine are they going to supply them? One that is on par with their 2016 model, or perhaps even use the whole year-old engine, which something that Dieter Renken outlined in an article for Autosport earlier in the month. Now, that's something that I copped a bit of flack for this morning on one of the articles I wrote, saying that where do I come up with this stuff of year-old engines? And I had to respond saying that this is something that was put forward put forward to the strategy group. So keep up with your news in that regard before having a go at someone. But yeah, what do you think? Would Ferrari give them an engine that's on par with their current spec, or would they have to use an engine with lesser spec, or even a year-old engine? Not that the Ferrari engine is in any way unreliable. It's a pretty strong engine, but maybe they might get one that's not on par with their works one.
Be Ferrari's prerogative to supply Red Bull with an engine which they see fit the parameters there, because if it's only going to be this short-term collaboration, be it 2 or 3 seasons, and there's no real long-term evolution between both of them. If clearly they went in as a semi-work status, as it were, as it's been with Renault, then you could see that they'd be on par with the Ferrari team as it is as a whole. But for 2 years, Red Bull, they're just going to have to wear any of these little compromises, I guess, and be satisfied with at least being, I guess, anything better than Renault power. And if the chassis is half good and the Ferrari engine is, if it were this year's model, then they're not going to be in bad shape. And maybe not regular victories, but certainly victories here and there can be achieved. And with all their resources going towards 2018 really being back at the forefront, then they'll want to have all attention there as it is, and that might be a bad thing.
Well, that's the point that I'm making in the piece that I'm currently penning at the moment. It's a work in progress, but why does the Red Bull brand fail to contemplate the long term, like so many teams have in the past, say like a Williams, for example, or even a McLaren, who've had a few years where they've been sort of nowhere midfield or getting minor podiums before they've been able to come back. Look at Williams, for example. You can go over their history in the mid-2000s with Toyota power, then with BMW power, whatever, and it hasn't been until they had that little bit of success with Renault, with Pastor Maldonado taking that win in 2012, and now ultimately with Mercedes-Benz, they've been able to come back. Why doesn't Red Bull see that patience?
A case could be made that Red Bull and their entire remit is just live for the now and forget the future. So clearly they've got the memories there of all their successes in the past, and they're just thinking right now at this time they're not doing well. They just want anything that's going to get them short to immediate success, and they'll worry about that future when it comes to pass.
But is that the right image to is that the right image to paint to the Formula One stakeholders and potential stakeholders, teams and organisations perhaps thinking of entering the sport, that if this is the way it is, come in, win a few championships and just leave after a year of poor results? Is that something that is going to attract or entice even people to come and watch races? I mean, what are the commercial rights holders, Bernie Ecclestone, doing about this?
Oh, most likely not from Red Bull. They're quite selfish, as it's been displayed in the past. They're in it for their own greater good, and they just have to hope that these big automotive brands, such as the Volkswagen Group, can take a leap of faith and see the potential which is there in coming seasons. And for the time being, Red Bull, I guess, they're not willing to really move on far from their central cause, which is just to promote their own brand as it is, and just be in this moment. They just want success right now.
Fair enough. And yeah, once this piece is finished, I'll be able to publish it and hopefully post a link in the description for you guys to check it out in your own time. But going back to Eddie Jordan's prophecies about the VW Audi group set to take over in 2018, Jordan reckons that it'll be Audi who will come into the fray as a full manufacturer effort with a Red Bull title. Red Bull being the title sponsor, and he reckons that ex-Ferrari team boss Stefano Domenicali, with the help of potentially Gerhard Berger, will run this new team out of Milton Keynes.
Oh, for Berger, he's been linked a while now in the background to stepping back into that fold. Of course, he had that previous tenure at Toro Rosso, which did yield that infamous victory with Sebastian Vettel Monza 2008. So it'd be no surprise at all there. And for Stefano Domenicali, who's been based out of Ingolstadt since his retrenchment from Ferrari over 12 months ago, and they're clearly two individuals of the highest caliber, and they'd be in safe hands, certainly if they were at the forefront of this link-up.
And amidst all this talk about VW Audi again, over the weekend at the Texas round of the World Endurance Championship, Dr. Wolfgang Ulrich again being pressed by the press about this, and again he dodged questions regarding the F1 tie-up with Red Bull, and he said the same thing again, that the story is still the same for 20 years and still I have nothing to say. So there we go, unless as
Maybe
we mentioned a few weeks ago, I think you brought this point up that the board want him out in order to make the F1 move possible, but first we have to see if they can sort out their emissions saga.
Yeah, I was just going to say with Dr. Ulrich, it's a bit of a Simon says, Simon said thing. Maybe it's Dr. Ulrich says, Dr. Ulrich said, and we have to blur the line between or contrast it, which one actually he's referring to as reality and which one's a myth, because at this point every other week he's coming out and making some kind of remark in line with all of these rumours, and it's really hard to tell which way it is going to go for now, but yes, all of that is going to be in spite of these rather revelationary claims that the emissions scandal that's engulfed the Volkswagen Group in the stateside, really. It's looming as a very costly lawsuit for them after they had fudged their general emissions numbers to boost their car sales, and whether this has any shaping on their potential future in F1 and even in the broader motorsport industry, whether this will affect their ongoing World Endurance Championship and those kind of commitments.
Well, yeah, as you said, financially they may take a hit. On Monday, it was reported that they lost about 20% of their share. Their share prices dropped in the US. So, considering how expensive F1 is as a sport to enter, losing that kind of money through a crisis or whatever with their road car business is clearly not something to look at. Clearly not something looking very positive, but we'll move it on from Audi and Red Bull until we find something solid. But yeah, we'll talk about Manor Marussia, and it seems that according to Eddie Jordan, that Lotus's soon-to-be discarded Mercedes-Benz power unit is going to go to Manor, and Jordan hints as well that Manor's going to receive technologies from Brackley and also Grove, which is the Williams outfit, to boost their chassis and also boost their position on the grid and essentially turn them into a feeder team for Mercedes-Benz. And this will allow the young Pascal Wehrlein to finally graduate from DTM into Formula One, because the Works Mercedes team clearly want him in that team for the future if Nico Rosberg or Lewis Hamilton decide to move on, and also Mercedes' road car business in the United States. They have a great interest in boosting their presence there, and that hints at potentially Alexander Rossi getting that second seat there as well, according to Eddie Jordan, that is. But it does sound pretty logical, doesn't it? And a lot of what Jordan has predicted in the past has come to pass, hasn't it?
We do have to be wary not to just take everything that Mr. Jordan says as gospel, as you mentioned earlier. But it's hard to make a case against him. He's been compelling in the mail he has received, and on this manor notion, it's been in the pipelines for a while now that they would inherit this the Mercedes PU supply once the Lotus situation and their acquisition by Renault is resolved. But I guess with Beerline as well, we have heard a few rumours in the past day or so as well. Sergio Perez still not 100%. If he ends up moving to Enstone, then there's a possibility that Beerline could get a more competitive seat at Force India, of course. He did do a test session for them this pre-season, so there's an outside chance he could end up there, but if not, it's almost certain he will end up in that Mercedes-backed Manor seat alongside, as you say there, Alex Rossi, who, if he keeps up his form displayed on his debut, then he's certainly worthy of the second seat.
Well, if Manor are set to get this technological boost as rumoured, then perhaps they may not be that team floundering around in the back of the grid. They could be getting up there, perhaps even challenging the Saubers and the likes. But we'll all see that. But speaking of Enstone, as you said, where is Romain Grosjean headed? And the Frenchman has come out and said that his decision has been made on his future, but he's not yet going to tell us. And what this has sort of come out and said from other various media agencies and what have you, they say that Grosjean has an agreement in place with Haas, but unless the Renault deal happens within the month, so until the end of September, he'll stay at Renault. But if it doesn't, then he will go to Haas. So essentially, his future is
another rumour just recently. If lightning strikes in the next 2 or 3 days, and Grosjean will end up at Mercedes, and that will just further muddy the waters. So we'll see. Based on all of this, a rather juicy conundrum for Grosjean. He's clearly hedging his bets both ways in this notion, but
it seems
as though he's leaning in that direction, and it's a leap of faith. But you can't blame him. It's a compelling case made with their real. Almost a factory support by Ferrari as that satellite team, and if they do hit the ground running, he could be in a more competitive car than the one which could be at the potential of a Renault-backed effort from next season.
Exactly, but he said that the deadline for the Renault deal, let's say, is the end of the month. So probably after the Japanese Grand Prix, we'll find out what is happening with Romain Grosjean. But we understand that the reason why the Renault takeover isn't complete yet or officially announced is that they're still waiting on a TV deal with FOM, the commercial rights holder, to earn its historic team payments as well. And Lotus as well will be back in court on the 28th of this month in their case against HRMC, who claim that they're owed an outstanding payment by the Enstone team. So a lot of finances, bookkeeping to be done before this Renault deal can take over. But if FOM finalise the historic team payments and entitlements for Renault, then you think everything's going to be rosy, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot does seem to hinge on this outcome there, the historical payments and what have you. But you can understand from Renault's point of view, they want to come in with the notion that they do have sound financial status there, and they do have pedigree. Of course, you go back 10 years, and they were really in their glory days. So it's not as though then they wouldn't be worthy of these payouts. And
also they want to wipe the slate clean. I guess they want to get rid of the Enstone team's debts and all these outstanding payments as well. So come in on a fresh slate with no external issues in that regard.
Oh, absolutely, and there's a very promising signs there for Renault if the package which has already been assembled to date can be really acquired and then developed with who knows what kind of capacity the Renault power unit would be for next season, but if not more realistically 2017, then and really the future is bright. But the next sort of 4 or 5 days, I guess, immediately in the aftermath of Japan is when we'll have that matters coming to a head, and it will just be good. Just the clarity there, we'll hear a lot more from that based around Grosjean at least.
Pretty much. And you said earlier as well that Lotus Sandstone, they confirmed that Maldonado would be staying around for 2016. So they've booked in one driver. He's done and dusted, and bit of a surprise actually, but it seems in that regard that Peter Visa and Total, if it is Renault going to take over, they've come to some agreement over Maldonado's placing at the team for next season. And you hinted before there as well that Sergio Perez's deal with Force India isn't quite done yet either, and perhaps there is still room for or time for him to come over to Enstone if Grosjean ends up going to Haas.
Well, certainly would be something. We heard strong reports a couple of weeks ago that Perez was almost over the line to remain at that Silverstone squad. So certainly, if he was to make the move, he'd be quite confident that Renault's got a capable package. Otherwise, you'd see no reason why not to stay put, as Nico Hulkenberg is now done for the next 2 campaigns. But if that does come to pass, and yeah, who knows, Force India, they've got a juicy seat there, and who knows who could end up there, because with Mercedes power, clearly they've still got that potential to be well, as well, the last few races have made some large leaps forward, so it's going to have its allures.
Yeah, so guys like, as you said before, Wehrlein are in contention for that, and even Kevin Magnussen as well if the deal with Haas doesn't come down. But yeah, we've got a bit of time left, and we're going to get straight into our preview of the Japanese Grand Prix as well. That'll be the final thing we'll discuss today. And yeah, we finish one race and we're off to another. And as well, before we get into it fully, it's going to be 12 months since the Jules Bianchi accident, which now became the fatal accident that he had, the appalling conditions that we saw 12 months ago at the Suzuka circuit. And in wake of that accident, the start time for the race is now 2 p.m. local instead of 3 p.m. And even there was the push to bring it forward another hour as well, make it 1 p.m. local, but the commercial rights holder wouldn't have that just because of the European TV audiences. And that's if 2 p.m. is going to avoid any sort of lighting problems and weather issues, then sure, we're all for it. But yeah, as long as we don't see...
Essentially, it should have happened 12 months earlier when it was...
It should have happened 12 months earlier. We were saying this prior to the race.
We never did anything about it. It was just, oh, well, we'll just take our luck and see what happens. And what did happen? Yeah, our first fatality in 2 decades. So... really, it's hard not to scratch your heads and just think, oh, well, a bit of logic finally. It's not all about the audiences, but someone's paid the price for it.
Exactly, and weather is always a factor at this circuit. We've seen typhoons, thunderstorms, heavy rain. It's still unclear as to what the forecast is for this weekend, but it seems like there might not be any rain, which is a good outcome. But yeah, 53 laps across this 5.8 kilometre pretty twisty circuit. It's a figure of 8 at its core, which is the only figure of 8 track that is on the Formula 1 calendar. All the drivers love it, especially Sector 1. A lot of twists, the Senna S's as well. Very fun track to drive. Medium and hard tyres for this circuit at high downforce, high speeds. And the question is, was Singapore a one-off for the Mercedes team, or are they going to be back to normal this weekend?
Conventional wisdom would suggest that the status quo will be resumed there unless there is some fallout. We did discuss privately over the course of the weekend that that fallout from the Monza weekend with the Pirelli tyres and the pressures there, whether this did have any conclusive impact on their fortunes at Singapore. And even Toto Wolff rather cheekily came out and wondered whether Pirelli had supplied them with an alternate set of rubber as some sort of retribution for that the outcome at Monza. you can't believe all of this nonsense ultimately, and it would be a surprise to see anyone other than Mercedes on a circuit which really fits the WO6 like a glove in its own.
Well, their rivals as well expect a normal service to be resumed, but we won't see until Saturday, perhaps, till qualifying, that where everyone is and whatnot. But anyway, Sebastian Vettel, this is another circuit that he has been quite successful at. He's the most successful of the current drivers, with 4 victories at the circuit, and he's only behind Michael Schumacher as having the most wins at the Japanese Grand Prix. And I guess, as you were saying before, that if normal service does resume, that this will be the ultimate test for Ferrari. If Mercedes are really having a trough, then Ferrari really could take the ascendancy and be on top here, and perhaps it'll be Vettel to lead the team for another victory, two on the bounce, as it were.
Oh, it'd be hard not to get excited if Ferrari pulled off another dominant display, and even if Kimi is up there on the podium as well, you'd really have to wonder whether they've seized that initiative and whether it's going to be too late to make a genuine run. But it's really, you've got to look back at the last, ever since Hungary, really, Vettel, he's scored more points than Hamilton, so it's not as though it's just come out of nowhere or the odd weekend here and there, and he had his missed points at Belgium, that penultimate lap blowout. So ultimately, he really is the form driver on the grid, and if they keep it up, it's going to be quite close by the time we reach Abu Dhabi.
Well, the championship has been opened up like Pandora's box at the last race. With Hamilton's retirement, of course, the gap between Hamilton and Rosberg, first and second in the standings, is 41 points, and then Vettel only lies a further 8 points adrift of Rosberg. So Vettel has the potential to jump into second place this weekend.
And also, yeah, imagine that those lost points of Belgium, he'd be even more in the hunt if that hadn't have gone by the wayside. So really, it's quietly encouraging. 2 victories on the run, and yeah, the suspense would be mounting quite seriously heading into the real American-based races after Russia.
Very much so, and Red Bulls, after their good result in Singapore, they seem wary of Williams. Williams, of course, pretty strong around these sort of the high-speed tracks, so perhaps a return to the podium for Bottas or Massa may be on the cards here. But then again, it's not exactly a power circuit either, is Suzuka. A lot of downforce is required, so maybe we might see Red Bull getting up there, top 5, maybe even challenging the likes of Williams. So we'll keep an eye on that. Daniel Ricciardo did say that if it rains, then there'll be a chance for Red Bull to mix it up there in the top 3, but in the dry it may not be so. And also, a big weekend, as you detailed earlier, Baden, for McLaren in front of Honda and all the Japanese fans as well. The circuit on paper doesn't suit the car at all, but what are we going to see? You know, is it going to be same service as always, or they're going to pull out something out of the hat, something special?
Unless Bernie's got something on the inside running with Honda and McLaren gives them some super set of Pirellis or some super gizmo which should be outlawed just to prop them up a bit, just in the interests of that marketability, then yeah, it's going to be same old, unfortunately, and all the big wigs are going to be frowning quite seriously and wondering what the entire investment was worth in the first place. It's a shame, but the promised inroads which were foreshadowed during that mid-season break, especially by Arisan, they've just almost stagnated in the subsequent races, and yeah, it's just not happened at all this year, and they can't wait, honestly, for this season to come to an end.
Pretty much so, and I guess that's about all the time we have for today. We've covered a lot, as you can see. We'll be back on Sunday with our pre-race show as well. It'll go up on Sunday.
Might be a Saturday evening on this occasion, in light of the time differences there, so it might be a bit earlier if you
potentially. Potentially, it'll be either Saturday evening or Sunday morning. But yeah, be sure to be around, and we'll have it up there again. Of course, the time difference is it's closer to us here in Australia, so we'll be able to enjoy watching the race in the afternoon. But other than that, I think that's all we've got for you today. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you guys on the weekend for the Japanese Grand Prix. Thank you.